Hi guys, this is Nadia from Bali Crafts, and today we're going to make a gemstone bracelet. If you like my tutorials, hit subscribe because I upload new stuff once a week. In the same vein, if you really enjoyed this technique and you want to share your version on social media, it would be absolutely awesome if you could give me a mention because it helps me grow my channel. So we're going to grab our first base wire and we are wrapping our weaving wire around it a few times to anchor it. And then we're going to step up by bringing in the second wire, another round wire, and we're placing it on top and wrapping our weaving wire once around the base before bringing up in the first half round. So make sure the half round has the flat section facing away from you. We're going to wrap our 0.4 around this once before repeating the process with the next half round, and then again with the last two remaining base wires. Now obviously the weave needs to start sort of about 5 centimeters or so, I don't know how much that is in inches, from the left hand side, because we need enough later on to actually finish off the bracelet with the wrap, so leave enough wire for that. So we're going to step up, and the weaving wire I usually work off the reel if at all possible. I would do this in one length because the less wire you have to add in, the less area there is to snag. So I tend to work off the reel. If you don't like that, you can always add in, if you like, shorter sections of wire. So as long as you've got enough. So we're anchoring the last one, and now we're going to start with the weave. So since they are all set, we're going to go once around all of the wire, the two top wires rather, sorry. So separate them out. And then we are stepping down and we're wrapping around wire 2 once before wrapping around wire 1, which is the wire at the bottom. Next we are going to wrap around wire 1 and 2 at the bottom, and then we are moving back up to the top and wrapping around the second last wire once before wrapping around the last top wire once, and then wrap around the top 2 wires all at once. And we are repeating this. Now we're going back down, open this up again, wrap around wire 2 once, then wrap around wire 1 once, and we repeat this 6 times. So you've got 6 sets of this weave. So now it's time to attach it to the half round wire. So in essence what we're doing is repeating exactly what we did, except this time we are going to do the same to the half round. So as we wrap once around each wire, we are now also wrapping around the half round on our way up. So one wrap around the half round, and then one wrap around the next half round, and then we just continue and wrap around the second wire from the top, the second last, and then from around the last wire at the top. And this is attaching the half rounds. On our way back, we're just going to repeat the weave we did initially. So wrap around wire, the 2 top wires once before on your way down, including the half round. Oops, I made a mistake there, just undoing. So around the half round once, and then around the second half round, and then we are going to wrap around the bottom 2 wires as we did. So it's exactly the same process, the same pattern, just including the half rounds. And we do this every 6 sets of weave. So every 6 sets of weave you have, we're going to include the half rounds, and then do another 6 sets and so on. So once you've done that, we need to start widening the gap after roughly about 2 sets of that, so to include the stone. So what I do there is I just take the stone I've decided to use, and I'm roughly gauging how big the gap needs to be. It needs to be big enough for the stone to comfortably sit in between the wires. So we're just going to continue until we get roughly to the starting point, like so, and see if the stone fits and it goes in perfectly between the two wires. So now we need to shape the wires around the stone in order to get the correct shape. So for that, I'm placing everything on my working area, and I'm holding the stone in place, and then using that as a template to force the wire, or shape the wire rather, around the stone. Now bear in mind the weaving wire will add a little bit of width, so you need to account for that when bending the wires, as you want the stone to fit in between those two outside wires on each side, kind of like a channel setting. So folding it out, and that's basically what it looks like, sort of fitting around the stone. So now we're going to continue until we get to the section. Now we can see where the stone goes. So obviously when you get to the center, you need to leave spacing. You do not include the half round weaving. Obviously you need to be able to open it and bend it around the stone. So you need to make sure that you've got enough of an open space of no weaving around the half rounds, that you can fold it around the stone, like so. So you bend it over the stone, and then you kind of press it back down to fit into the groove, just as it would be exactly before the stone was put in place. So you bend it back down, and this is where you're going to place your next set of wraps around the half round. Hope that makes sense. So just bending it down is a bit of a fiddly business, but once you've got it, it sits nicely. So once there, you obviously need to then attach the stone in place. So we're going to do exactly the same weave as before. We are wrapping around our half round. So here you're trying to be as close to the stone as possible. So when I'm wrapping, going around the half round, I push the weave up as close to the stone as possible, because that will put tension on the wire to keep the stone in place. And then obviously we just repeat the same pattern. So we're going to go around the top wire, and you see me here, because we are reducing the weave, was going down to narrow point, it has a tendency to slip forward. So as I'm weaving, I am putting my finger on the weave wire to stop it from sliding forward. And periodically I will also bring in my pair of pliers to push the weave up. There we go. So I'm pushing this up, and now once I've done a couple of wraps, I am now pushing the weave up against the stone, which will also help tighten and neaten everything up. So just keep doing that, and then we're going to continue until we get to the end. So it's exactly the same weave as we've been doing all along, just that we are now coming back to a point where all the wires sit side by side with no gap in between. So keep adjusting. That's what it looks like so far. So continue. And this is now what we get once we've finished, and we need to create the sort of loop for the findings. So the way I'm doing this, there are many ways of doing bracelet endings. This is just one way, and again I'm going to take a section of my half rounds to attach this. Before you do that, however, it's quite important to make sure that the sort of arms of the bracelet are the same length, because there's nothing worse than finishing and realizing one side is longer than the other. So just make sure it's roughly about the same length. And we're going to create the sort of ending of the bracelet by using some half round wire, the same gauge that we've used for the inside, and we're going to hook it. So create a little fold, we'll hook it, and we are now going to wrap it. Now it will narrow, because obviously where we're seating this half round wire, there's no weave, so it will naturally push the wires together, and it will narrow to a point. You can avoid this if you want to by putting it on the weave, but I quite like the look, so I will put it on an area where there's no weave. So we wrap it around 2 or 3 times. So just press and make sure that once you have wrapped and you finish with your wrapping, that the ends you're going to trim off are sitting on the inside of the bracelet, because we're going to cut and we're going to tuck away the ends, and obviously all the unsightly bits you want to hide on the inside. So once you're satisfied with the length, we're going to trim them off, or we'll squish them down a little bit with a pair of pliers. So once you're satisfied, we're going to trim off the wires roughly in the middle, because we're going to fold them over and tuck the ends towards the inside of the bracelet. Because it's quite a heavy gauge of half round, it will stay put once pressed down, so this is quite a good way to finish. Fold it over, and then this is where the sort of bent nose pliers come in handy. Really cool little tool, like using it because it's very handy for situations like this. So push, and that's what it looks like so far. So next we want to obviously secure this in place. So I'm going to take the half rounds from the center and I'm going to fold them backwards towards the center of the bracelet, and that will anchor the half round wrap we've just made to the bracelet. So we're going to trim off. Like so, and then we are going to once again fold the half round wire inwards. Trim off a little bit. You don't want it too long, otherwise it will stick up, or too short and it won't bend in enough, so you need to gauge that. So once you've bent it, we are just going to fold it in and then press it into the bracelet like so. Do the same with the other side. So next we need to create the wrap loop. For that we need to get rid of 2 of the wires. So I'm going to fold the outermost wire around the innermost wire on each side. So I'm going to wrap it once. And that's enough. It's quite a thick wire, so you don't want to create too much of a bulk here. So just one is enough. We're going to do both sides, and then we are trimming off the wires on each side. And obviously make sure that you cut them off in such a way that they won't snag on anything. And that's what it looks like so far. So the last step is to create a wrap loop. So once again we are going to bend the wires, crossing them over, and put a 90-degree bend in one of them, and we're just simply going to wrap the other wire once around that wire we've just bent, and this creates an anchor point. So we're going to trim that off. So next we obviously need to create a loop. So for that you bring in your round nose pliers and make it fairly big if you want to get some bigger findings to fit through there. So don't make the loop too small unless you want to attach just jump rings like we're going to do here. So it just depends on the design. So it's a wrap loop. Now make sure when you are wrapping this wire that you come in from the opposing side of the bottom loop, because the 2 ends, once you wrap this wire end around the loop, will then meet up where the cut section is, and it will slot into place beautifully without creating bulk. So I'm holding this now and I'm going to wrap, and you can see that the wire wraps around the stem, the base, and it meets up in the opposing direction to the first wire we've wrapped, and this will then slot into place once cut. So trim it off. Make sure that they kind of not overlap, just meet up, because once you press them down with your pliers, they will slot into place. And that's what it looks like. So that's the inside. And last thing you need to do is obviously just attach your findings on that. So next we're going to add the beads. So attach a piece of 0.6 roughly where you want the last bead to sit, the smallest bead to sit. So we're just going to feed some 0.6, which is 22 gauge wire, through there, and then feed it right up next to the stone. And we're going to bring this wire back up and slide it underneath the stone. So we're going to come back up like so. You may need to manipulate a little bit because it's the weave is quite tight, so pull that through, and then we're going to feed this underneath the stone. There will be enough room to pull it under, which will further wedge the stone in place as well, because it'll lift it slightly. There we go. And next we are going to bring that 0.6 up just on the outside of the stone, exactly like on the other side. You want to make it as symmetrical as possible. So pull that up, and then obviously add the amount of beads you want. And then we are going to feed this through roughly where the last bead sits, just like on the other side. Pull that through, and that's what it looks like so far. So now obviously the stone isn't anchored yet properly. It sits quite tightly, but you obviously need to make sure that it is properly tight. So the 0.6 will wrap a couple of times around the side of the stone. So I will bring it up towards the center like so. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to fold it around the stone itself. So I'm going to shape the bangle or the bracelet first, because that will give me the final sort of seating, if that makes sense. So I'm shaping this first. So for that, it's quite soft copper, even with the thicker gauges, so it's easy to shape like that. So you don't really need a tool, and I can control it better as well. So shape it until you're satisfied with the look. Make sure you leave a little bit of a space for the findings. So once we've done that, we are now just going to lay the 0.6 right next to the half round, crossing over the stone, and this will add an extra layer of security to keep the stone in place. And once you've done that, we are just going to trim off the wires, and that's it. So you add your findings, and that's the whole bracelet done. Hope you enjoyed this. If you liked my tutorial, consider subscribing, because I upload new stuff all the time. I'd absolutely love to see your versions, so why not join our little crafters group, which is called Wire Wrap and Jewelry Artists Worldwide on Facebook. If you want to see what I get up to. Otherwise, why not pop in on my Instagram, Facebook or TikTok, all under Mbali Crafts. And lastly, I've got loads of tutorials and workshops and square and half round wire on my website or Etsy shop. So yeah, pop by there and see if I've got anything you like.